What's up guys, it's Avery here. In every young real estate investor's life, there comes a time when they think about scaling up. And that could mean buying more than 1 or 2 properties a year, or that could mean buying a 69-unit apartment complex. And it really depends on the type of goals that you have. And at one point, a year and a half ago, I had a 23-unit building under contract, and I almost lost about $10,000. And today, I will share that story. Just like Grant Cardone says, I wanted to 10x it. Instead of buying a 2 to 3 unit property every single year, I wanted to buy a 20 to 30 unit property. And this goal was really important for me, so I could make a YouTube video all about it, so I could ask you out there to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so for more tips in investing in real estate and things that you can do with your money in order to build your wealth. So scaling up is an age-old question you have to ask yourself when you start investing in real estate. And what that means is typically you're going to be trying to buy more properties. Many people get into the game and they get addicted, just like myself. I buy that one property and I want to buy more. But there becomes a lot of barriers when it comes to finding and purchasing more properties, one being money, and another being actually finding that deal. And another thing being spending your time on something. If you purchase 1 2-unit building, you're probably going to put the same amount of effort into that transaction as if you were going to buy 1 20-unit building. So for a lot of people, it makes sense to buy more. And when it comes to buying more, the best way to do it for most people is to have partnerships and finding other people for private money. Scaling up makes a lot of sense because instead of buying that small property every single year and having a bunch of different buildings to deal with, you can just have a couple of really big buildings that could net you the same amount of return or potentially even more while only having to worry about one specific asset. And the other good thing about scaling up and having these bigger buildings, similar to if you have a single family versus a 3-unit, if there's vacancy in 1 unit, it has a far less impact on a larger building than on a smaller building. If your single family home is without renters for 1 month, you have lost 100% of your income. But if your 20-unit building is out of a 1 unit for 1 month, you've only lost 1/20th of the income for that building that specific month. So it makes a lot more sense in terms of economies of scale. Plus the cost per unit as you go larger will be less. A single family in the area might cost $500,000, but if you're buying 20 units, it might be $100,000 per unit for that building. So when you're scaling up, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and one would be through partnerships. And in order to find partnerships, you have to network and go talk to people. And this is something that I try to do often, but something that I actually have a hard time with. I'm actually quite quiet and somewhat shy when it comes to talking to people in a room, and I am quite introverted and don't love talking to people all that often, which may come as a shock to you. I don't know, put in the comments below, do you think I was introverted or extroverted? I want to hear what you guys think. But when I get to the end of a networking event, even though I've made some good interactions and met some good people, pretty much always have to come home, go to sleep, have a cough drop, whatever it is, drink water for 2 hours because I've been talking so much compared to normal. So it's not something that I love doing, but I know that it's necessary if I want to scale up and partner. So when you're bringing in money and you have this group of people, this is known as a syndication. So say there's 3 of you there in this partnership that are the main owners of the building. So you'll give away a small portion of equity as well as in return of cash flow for those people who are bringing in money, while the 3 of you are the people who are actually finding and managing that specific asset. So now you don't have as much money as if you were buying it yourself, but the economies of scale are there and you can get a small portion of a much larger pie. When it comes to a syndication, there's also going to be more things associated with it than actually just buying a regular residential building. As soon as you hit 5 units and up, you are in that commercial space and things are completely different than the 4 units and down. So you're actually going to need an SEC attorney because you're selling a security. So that's already one added layer of things that are more difficult. You're going to be handling other people's money, so you need to have a good way to track that, the inflow and outflows of the money. And you're going to need to give people tax documents when they're making some money for cash flow and things like that. You're going to have to stay much more organized than if you were just using a dumb Excel sheet on your own properties for yourself. And some other things that you're going to need to take into account when it comes to purchasing larger property would be liquidity requirements. So this is important when you have, say, a $1 million building and you put 20% down and you have an $800,000 loan. When it comes to these commercial buildings, you're going to need to have to show that you have $800,000 of liquid net worth available between you and the partnership team. So at the point when I was looking for buildings, I had a much less amount of equity and net worth than that, and I still do. So you need someone who meets those requirements. So sometimes when you're getting started, you'll have someone who is more senior and has done this before just sign on to the loan with you so that you can meet those liquidity requirements. One more thing before I get into the story of this specific building that I almost purchased and almost lost $10,000 on would be how commercial properties are valued. In residential real estate, it is valued on comparable homes. If your neighbor's home looks kind of like your home, then it's going to be a comp, and that's how they're going to value your home when an appraiser comes by. But with commercial properties, it is very different. It's purely based off of the net operating income. So if you can increase the net operating income of your building, then you can increase the value of your building. And you can do that without doing any renovations. So for example, in your residential home, you fix up the kitchen, it increases the value of the home. But maybe if you have that 20-unit building and there's a basement space that is not being utilized, and then you get people to come in and pay for storage, then you've increased the income of your home, and then you've increased the income and the valuation of that property. Okay, so the actual building itself. So the first thing that I wanted to do was network and find those partnerships. So after a number of cough drops and me being extremely tired after going to all of these networking events after work, I was able to meet some people who had seemingly like-minded ideas. And at the time, I really wanted to just do this. So anything anyone said just sounded cool to me, and I really wasn't thinking straight. And I will forewarn you that when you are looking for partnerships and looking to scale up, it is pretty much the same thing as marrying your partner. You have to think about it like that. This person is someone you're potentially going to have a multi-million-dollar loan with. And if you don't like them and don't like spending time with them and you can't relate very well or communicate, they're not someone who is good to get into bed with. It's almost more risky than marrying someone because it's harder to get out of that loan than it would be to divorce someone. So I found that partnership of people who were looking for something similar, that 20 to 30 unit range of a building, and we really just got after it and started looking, and we had a lot of good metrics and things that we were doing to decide on what type of building we were trying to find and where we were going to find it. So I was looking about an hour and a half away from the Boston area, and I was cold calling a bunch. So this is one really good way to find deals. You can pull lists from the internet, from public records, and then see who the owners are of specific buildings, find their phone number on the internet, and then call them and ask and see if they will sell their property. Pretty much 9.5 times out of 10, they will say nothing, or they won't answer you, or they'll tell you to screw off because they don't care. But sometimes you are building these seeds, and eventually these people will want to sell to you. So it's definitely a slow game and doesn't happen right away. And that's something that I was doing and bringing to the partnership, as well as finding other brokers to bring deals. So when you're looking for commercial properties, it's not the same as a residential property. You're not just going to get a real estate agent and look what's on market. Typically in the commercial property space, there is not really anything on market. There's a website called LoopNet that has some stuff, but it's pretty much everything that has dribbled down through the broker's plate and that they don't really want to deal with anymore. Because when a broker gets a deal and they want to get it closed, typically they'll take it to an investor that they know can handle the deal and they know will close and get the funds and everything available so that they can be a good broker and that their client can get a sale. So a lot of it happens offline or off market. So if you have a really good broker relationship, that is a good way that you can actually get a building. But if you're new to the game, it's a lot harder to get that broker relationship because you haven't proved yourself yet. So I hadn't proven myself in the commercial space or on YouTube yet, but since you guys love me so much, you share my videos with all of your friends, and you're doing that right now. And then this broker himself was able to find us this 23-unit property, and the owners were looking for $2.3 million. So $100,000 per unit, which seemed pretty high for the area. So we were going through some creative ways that we could finance this, and it seemed like a good idea where the seller was going to bring some money to the table through something called seller financing. So you have less money in the deal and less money that you have to get from private money investors, and you'll have a smaller loan, all this kind of stuff. Won't get into it in this video, but we had the building under contract. And the way it works in commercial property is you got to put that earnest money deposit down, which would be 10% of the purchase price, or $23,000. So it was myself and a husband and wife team, so I figured we'd split it 3 ways, and this is already where things went poorly with that partnership. So we were both located in the Boston area, and they had a property there. I only had the duplex at the time, as well as they had some properties down south. So they were kind of concerned about the amount of money that they had and reserves and all of that stuff. So was I, because I didn't want to be getting rid of any of my money. And at the time I had $17,000 in my saving account, and I said that I'd be okay with funding $10,000. And you're thinking I said that I was going to be funding this with private money, but before you actually purchase the building, you're not going to get that money from people. You need to have the deposit ready, you need to have things ready for appraisal, for inspection fees and all that, and eventually at closing, when you get the money from these private lenders and from the bank, then you can pay yourself back, but you need some money to bridge the gap. So I was going to pay $10,000 of that 23, and they were going to split the rest, which was already higher than a third. And the day of, they asked if I could put down 11, and I just had to say no, and things were weird at that point. And beforehand, it started getting weird to communicate with them, and I wasn't really sure how I was feeling about this partnership, but I was still dead set on the idea that buying a 20 to 30 unit building was the best thing that I could do. So when it came to this specific building, things looked good. We were in the due diligence phase, paid my $10,000, took a deep breath before I had to do that. And then when we realized how much they were getting in rent and how much they said they were getting for rent, things were not right. So when it comes to the commercial real estate world, typically there's a rent roll that you're given as well as expenses, and 11 times out of 10, the expenses are far lower than what they say they are, but it's up to you to do your due diligence to actually understand the expenses. And like I said, it's purely based off of net operating income. So if they can show you the rent roll and what they think the expenses are, that's how they're getting to the valuation of the building. So you can actually figure out what the expenses are when you're in this due diligence period. And like I said, expenses are typically not accurate, but it's up to you to understand it. But the rents usually are accurate, and what the issue was with this building is they were getting a lot less in rent than they said they were. They were not only saying that some units were not vacant when they actually were vacant, but some units that, for example, were only paying $800 a month in rent, they said were paying $1,200, $1,300. So that completely changes the value of the property. And when we noticed this, we were looking to renegotiate, but they weren't willing to budge. And clearly they had purchased the building for far too much a couple of years ago, and they were trying to get rid of it because it wasn't working well for them. So because of this, we backed out of the deal. Numbers didn't make sense. I was able to actually get my $10,000 back, which I was sweating for about a week over before the check arrived in the mail. And I actually, because of this experience, backed out of that partnership. I realized our goals were not aligned. I did not really care about just getting a 20 to 30 unit building. At the time, it sounded really cool to me, and it's still something that I want to do eventually with the right people, but this at the time didn't seem like the right people. They seemed more concerned with saying that they could have a 23 unit building on Instagram rather than actually having a 23 unit building that cash flows well, that brings them happiness, that brings them financial freedom and all of those good things. So I took a break from the commercial real estate and I'm doing the things that I'm doing today. So I actually have a huge qualm with a lot of real estate investors and how they think about what a good deal is or what a good metric is to understand if it's a good deal. So if you have a bunch more units, all of a sudden you're supposed to be really good at real estate investing. And this is pushed a lot in the real estate investing world, especially through the website Bigger Pockets. But just because you have more units really doesn't mean anything. You could have a bunch of small single family homes in the Midwest that are each worth $50,000, or you could have bought one $250,000 house that earns you the same amount of money, equity, principal pay down, and you only have one house to worry about instead of 5. Same thing goes, you could buy a 20 unit apartment building that none of the units are even rented out and you're doing horribly, but on the internet you can say you have a 20 unit apartment building. But who really cares about that? Is it bringing you any step closer to financial freedom? Is it making you happy? Is it actually making you some money? These are all things that I personally care way more about than the number of units that I say I have. That's why right there in my Instagram bio, I kind of make a joke to this and say how many toilets I own, because who really cares? But I do own 7 toilets and the goal is to get to 69. Syndicating really is also a full-time job. Typically people are selling these properties after 5 to 7 years for specific tax reasons, and you have to give investors that information every month on how much cash flow they're getting. You gotta have attorneys involved. You gotta have a relationship manager of yourself with these people and make sure that they are feeling bad about the specific investment so that they'll invest again. So it can be kind of a full-time job and you're dealing with other people's money. If I lost some of my own money, that is my own valuable lesson. But if I lost tens of thousands of dollars of someone else's money, that is a whole different ballgame about going to sleep at night. So it's something that you got to think about. So if you guys enjoyed that story about this 23 unit building that I had under contract, and I'm glad that I never actually closed on it. So don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe so more people can learn about commercial real estate investing and hear more about my story. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you guys next time.